Want to welcome everybody for joining us here. We're just going to wait just 1 minute before we get started, make sure that everybody has the opportunity to get in. You will find the chat functionality on your Zoom screen, so feel free to say what's up to your homies on the panel, ask questions. My name is Ricardo Baca, and I'm the founder of Grasslands, which is a strategic communications agency. We do some PR, content marketing, thought leadership for lots of brands in cannabis and hemp. And it is my pleasure to be your MC for the evening, or the afternoon, just introducing the panel because we have some superstars here to have a very, very forward-looking conversation on the future of commercial cannabis cultivation. So it looks like people are getting acclimated, finding the chat, love it. With that, I am getting ready to jump right in. So the big question at hand is, where is commercial cannabis cultivation headed? Because as cultivators navigate the challenges of the expanding cannabis industry, compounded today by the COVID-19 pandemic, it is more critical than ever to be thinking ahead. And the cultivators who embrace new tools and technologies are absolutely the businesses that will survive and even thrive through the crisis and into the future. I want to thank you very much for coming today to this webinar. I want to thank our host, Cannabis and Tech Today magazine. And speaking of Cannabis and Tech Today, it's my pleasure to introduce your moderator for the afternoon, my friend Chuck Warner, who is the editor-in-chief of Cannabis and Tech Today and also the host of Cannabis Tech Talks. Which is a podcast that I was lucky enough to be a guest on a couple weeks ago. Honestly, take a note. You'll be glad you did. Cannabis Tech Talks. Go subscribe to it. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Chuck, who will introduce the rest of the panel and the panelists. So Chuck, take it away, my man.
All right. Thanks so much, Ricardo. Welcome, everybody. We are very excited to have you. We have an absolutely dynamite panel here. And as Ricardo said, cultivators need to be able to see a few steps into the future in order to take action now. So for the next 75 minutes, industry leaders are going to share their insights on the game-changing technologies and techniques that will emerge as the next trend in cannabis cultivation. At the end of this, when there's about 15 minutes left, we're going to go to a Q&A. So feel free to enter all of your questions that you have. There's a little box down at the bottom there where you can enter your questions, and we'll go ahead and pose those to the panel at the very end of the session. And also make sure that you guys invite your friends, get them in here last second, because this is going to be a really, really great panel. And now, the real stars of this webinar, I'm very proud to introduce the panelists that we have here. And if you don't mind, gentlemen, can you just tell us, who you are, where do you work, and what you do briefly? And we'll start first with Aaron.
Hey, thanks for having me. My name is Aaron Mullins. I work for a company named Next Big Crop. We offer construction management and owners representation services, as well as design and startup services for all the projects that we do. I serve as a systems integrator here, which means that I really just come in during the design process, and I help to make sure that the projects we're working on are as efficient and use as much space as possible. And then after everything gets up and going, I come in and commission most of the systems and make sure that everything's operating correctly and doing what we're telling it to.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. That's Aaron with Next Big Crop. And next up on the panel, we have Doug. Tell them who you are, Doug.
Hey, everyone. Appreciate your time. First and foremost, I'm a grower. I've been growing cannabis as a hobbyist as well as a commercial operator for the past 25 years. I guess you could say I have a lot of knowledge of knowing what not to do from all the trial and error over the years. I was formerly trained at Colorado State University in horticulture. My concentration was turf science. Really, my passion in the industry is genetics. I've been a very active cannabis genetics preservationist for really the past 25 years. On the commercial side of the industry, I co-founded Sealed Environment Agriculture Labs, which is a licensed cultivation extraction facility in Colorado. We used clean room cultivation techniques. Proud to say that in almost 10 years we were in operation, we never once had any pest or disease. Doesn't make me very good at IPM, but pretty darn good at showing guys how to not get the pest and disease. And now I'm a member of the Hawthorne Gardening Professional Technical Services team as a horticulturist. And essentially as a cannabis agronomist, I help other growers make data-driven cultivation decisions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And next up, we've got Marc Paynter. Marc, let them know who you are.
Hi, thanks everybody for showing up today. My name is Marc Paynter. I work with Argus Controls. I'm the Western US, Western Canada sales rep. Worked there for about almost 4 years now. And to Doug's point, just through controls, being able to see people's mistakes and learning from them and helping guide people along, making sure that their controls is all integrated correctly. And then again, working with Aaron and Josh to be able to integrate all of these systems into grows.
Nice. Thank you very much for being here. Shout out to Argus Controls. And last but not least, we've got Josh Conley.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, everyone, for showing up today. So I'm Josh Conley, founder and owner of Next Gen Greenhouse. We do turnkey greenhouse solutions as well as rolling benches for cannabis industry and non-cannabis too as well. My background stems from my grandfather started a greenhouse manufacturer 75 years ago, Conley's Manufacturing and Sales. Went through the ranks as a youngster there, then to break off and to specifically focus in on turnkey facilities for cannabis cultivation.
Awesome. And speaking of backgrounds, you have the best background here by far. Okay, so let's get started. I know everybody's excited to hear what we've got to talk about. So let's kick it off. Just a little bit of kind of where we are now so that we can move forward to where we're going. Obviously, the coronavirus pandemic has thrown a massive wrench into the kind of business as usual for the cannabis industry. I mean, it's done it for everybody. Cannabis is not left out of that. As we re-examine what will enable cultivators to succeed in the coming months, it's important to understand best practices that are going to make an impact. Let me ask you, how is automation, thoughtful facility design, and professionalization helping these cultivators through these times?
One of the biggest things that we as a company has always tried to push on people is I try to automate as many of the day-to-day and menial tasks as we possibly can. I would like to have some kind of system mixing nutrients and sending it to the plants, monitoring the environment and doing everything that it can there, so that people have more time to spend with the plants and actually pay more attention to them and spend more of their effort towards the plants. All this virus stuff that's going on, those people that have invested in these types of systems, it's a lot easier for them to run their facilities with skeleton crews because they have computers, mixing nutrients, feeding the plants, monitoring the rooms, doing a lot of these duties that, some facilities are still watering their plants by hand. And if you're stuck in that situation, you're required to have people come into work, to make sure that your plants are alive. A large majority of these facilities could be left alone for days without having anybody touch them. Your plants are still going to be alive and your investment's still going to be there.
And to piggyback on Aaron's point with Argus having multiple ways to get remote access into your system. So you don't have to be on site to remote into your computer if there's an alarm that goes off, or if you need to make some changes to the environmental controls. You don't have to be on site to do that. You can remote in through Argus Live or TeamViewer into the Argus computer on site. So you've got multiple options to run a smaller crew and still be able to have the control and accessibility required.
Yeah, and I would add,
that's key right now, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll add that while Aaron's point of having a smaller crew there is probably the most prevalent thing to do, a grow facility is inherently disinfected. So for example, there's a lot of technologies that we're using that involve recirculating UV light and positive pressure and different things that are really out there to kill pathogens already. So that might already be in your facility that are helping to mitigate viruses too as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and something I'd like to add to that is, in times like these, reducing need for labor is certainly a key. You don't know who's going to be coming in from day to day. And so, really getting ahead of issues is a real key component. That's really something I focus heavily on, my recommendations to other growers. Intelligently designed facilities with proper SOPs, they ultimately allow that cultivator to get ahead of those issues and ultimately be more efficient in the time it takes the cultivation team to grow a healthy crop. Essentially prevent those issues so you don't have to spend the time it takes to address those issues.
And what about facility design? Can one of you kind of speak to that, how important that is right now?
One of the biggest things that we do when we're designing facilities out, just inherently from the start, is to try and minimize the different work group areas, or the different workers that are coming into contact with each other. If I have a group of people that's working in my veg or my prop area, I'd rather them not having any contact with anybody in the flower areas in case we have any pest or disease in there. I don't want it transferring into my veg. Likewise, anybody that's involved in harvest or in post-harvest duties, I don't want them walking by anybody that has anything to do with any activities related to the plants. So if you've already designed your facility in this method and you've done your best to minimize the spread of pathogens and bugs like everybody else is talking about, your design inside your facility is inherently going to be much safer and better when pandemics and other things like this arise.
Okay. Given the current reality and obviously the limitations that we have, what are you guys seeing? What are your partners seeing or experiencing that might be of value to this audience?
I'm a very optimistic person, but in business, you have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So far, the supply chain for supplies and control products is intact. There's a distinct possibility that could change. Cultivators should be selecting their supply partners well. Those that have buying power, a long track record of consistency, those are going to be your key partners in days to come. And also be very efficient on what you use and when you use it's also going to be key. Do more with less to really make it last.
And we haven't seen, as far as my customers are concerned and clients, we really haven't seen a dip yet. We expect to at some point. This has got to affect. It's got to affect them. It's just too big of a pandemic not to. But as of now, everyone's really feels good about their position that we work with.
Okay.
Projects get pushed out or deferred, but nothing really canceling. And with the lead times of a lot of the equipment that goes into these places, if you're 2-3 months out, still getting the project off the ground and still moving forward to meet timelines is super important now more than ever.
Okay. All right. Well, let's, and I'm sure coronavirus is going to come up throughout the conversation, but again, we want to, keep this, the focus towards kind of the future and some of the cutting edge, technologies that are helping out right now. Let's stay in the facility design and build. And let me ask you guys this. What are the differences between indoor cultivation and greenhouse operations? And why would you choose one over the other? Kind of the age-old discussion.
Honestly, it's the environment what you're going to build your facility in. There are different tools for different jobs essentially. You can do indoor cultivation or greenhouse anywhere you want to in the world, but it definitely gets a lot more expensive depending on where you're at. I know there's some massive greenhouses going up in Canada, and there's some like in New York and in areas like that. They have to spend a lot more money on insulation and really trying to lock those in. I would recommend more that somebody look at an indoor operation in areas like that, because in my experience, you have to put almost as much money into more of like a hybrid greenhouse as you would more of like an indoor cultivation. Places like Southern Colorado or Southern California, those areas are wonderful for greenhouses. You get all this free sun or all this free energy from the sun. They're a lot more energy efficient. If you understand how to run them, you can produce some super, super high quality product out of them.
Yeah, the major difference that I see, and when I explain to my customers, is that in the greenhouse you're going to deal with the outside environment. You know your greenhouse is subject to that. That is the most efficient method of cooling and heating the greenhouse, is using some of the outside and elements, whether that's the sun to heat it or whether that's the air, the cold air outside to cool it, to as well air exchanges. As we're an indoor facility, you basically have a sealed environment with air conditioners that are keeping it constant the entire time. So location plays a huge key. The design plays a huge key based on the location, and really, in order to get the benefits of a greenhouse, you have to have a proper design if you want to produce high quality flower.
And it looks like you're in a pretty awesome greenhouse right there. Are these greenhouses, the future of the industry, Josh?
I think there's always going to be a place for indoor, and being a greenhouse manufacturer, I would say I would love to say there'll be no more indoor, or it's a way of the past, but that's just simply not going to be the case. I definitely, over the past 5 years, have seen a tremendous shift in the greenhouse, and we've seen a lot of people get really good and talented at growing in the greenhouse. I think operators are somewhat, and the design of the facilities have been somewhat of a limitation, as opposed to where indoor had decades of experience behind it in the black market, coming up to it. Now that you're dealing with large greenhouse grows, and that the first time you really had the ability to do that was with legalization. So there's been a learning curve there, and that's really what we're seeing, is people being able to step up into that learning curve and really start to produce high quality flower. And I think there's always going to be a place for indoor, based on location, or just what a grower or operator's preference is.
Okay. And we touched earlier about design and layout, but maybe Josh and Aaron, you guys could touch on this. What are you seeing as far as layout of the facility that impacts everything that comes later, from labor flow to best practices, regulatory compliance? Maybe you guys can speak to that a little bit.
I have seen, the design is everything for a facility. Really what we try to preach is that I don't want to maximize everything. I want to optimize everything. A lot of the time you have to balance what the owner is willing to pay for and what the grower wants, and the actual physical limitations of where you're building and what you have going on. One of the best things that you can do is really select a good team and vet it, and build for the future. A lot of the people that we initially started working with, they thought that they were going to build these facilities, run them for 6 months, and turn around and sell them for millions of dollars and retire. And anybody that is going to be coming into this industry, once the legalization starts to take place more, they're not going to want to buy some fly-by-night operation. They're going to want to buy a nice facility that is set up with the future in mind, and they're looking forward towards everything. I've seen people that, like one of my favorites that we've had, we tried drilling a well for a greenhouse that we were building down south, and you have to be 100 foot from any property line to drill a well, and the property was only 150 foot wide. So we had to get a variance from the state to drill a well, and it took almost 2 months just to get a permit to drill a well. But normally it takes us like a week, around a week. So just as far as design goes, take your time and really get a thought out plan. And if you don't necessarily know what you're doing, seek some experts. There's enough of us out here now. There's plenty of people that have built hundreds of thousands, if not millions of square feet of grows. We have a lot of experience, and I know there's a lot of other people out there that have some really, really good experience, but seek help.
Yeah, Aaron, you mentioned to have them build for the future. Where do they, if they don't know how to build for the future, you said seek out experts. What's a good first step for them to make sure that they are building for the future?
Well, a lot of what we do is we try to build a facility that we would want to work in. Oftentimes people, like I was saying, they try to maximize everything. So they try to cram as many lights into a facility as they can, as many rolling tables as they can. And it makes it really awkward and hard for workers to be in. When you jam stuff in really tight, it's a lot easier for mold and pests and everything else to kind of take hold without anybody noticing. So really it's building a facility that's going to be around for 10, 20 years. Like I want to build something that we can grow out of. So I generally try to phase things. Like if I have a customer that has a 40,000 square foot building and they don't necessarily have enough funding to build it completely out, we would design the facility in such a way that we could maximize or optimize at least half that space. We'd get 20,000 foot of usable space. And once they get the facility up and going and operating, then we can take that capital and build out the rest of the facility. But everything that we do is trying to look forward. Like right now, a lot of cultivators are just wasting nutrients. We're either running it down the drain or we're trying to dispose of it in other ways. A lot of the reclamation that we currently have just isn't really ideal, and I don't feel comfortable pushing it back to the plants. So everything that we do is we try to sequester those nutrients in a separate area, so we can clean it up and try to use it in other ways or donate it. But really just trying to see where this industry is going. It's going to be a lot more economically friendly. People are moving towards LEDs, so we don't have as much waste with the HPS. Figuring out ways to reclaim your nutrients. Just trying to be better stewards.
Okay. Josh, you got anything to add towards that with regard to, kind of layout and design for the future?
Yeah, I think Aaron touched on all the critical points, and what we often see is with clients is they want all of the futuristic technology, but some of it is simply unproven at a point. So I'll add that we do want to look into the future, but you have, with particular budgets in mind, you have to be conscious about equipment or practices that you're putting in play that are unproven or not, haven't been tested. So we see a lot of facilities being built with a lot of wasted capital expenditure on things that simply end up in the corner as a $100,000 piece of equipment that's a paperweight. So we really want to talk to the experts, make sure what you're buying is for the future and not snake oil, if you will, and make sure that you're buying tried and true equipment.
A lot of experience that I've had, we see a lot of customers, they waste their CapEx and then spend OpEx constantly trying to fix the facility. Whereas if you use your CapEx proper and get that dialed in right out the gate, and then you're not using as much OpEx to fix this, fix that, and have to replace a bunch of equipment. If you get with a proper integrator and proper design team that can maximize the use of your money and be able to build it correctly the first time.
Okay. So what about, before we jump over to automation, what about lighting? There's the age-old debate, it's like Tupac versus Biggie, there's indoor, there's outdoor, what's the best lighting? What are you guys seeing? What are you guys hearing, as far as moving towards the future for best yields and things like that?
Yeah, at Gavita, we've done a lot of, we've been in the lighting industry for decades, and there's been significant advancements in lighting. I'm with these guys. Proven technology is very, very important. I think we're now at the point where LED has arrived. No doubt about it. With the phosphocoated blue LED or diodes, we've got broad spectrum. Efficiency keeps improving. Growers are understanding that with LED, we're not getting with that the infrared that you get from HID. And so plant temperatures are a whole lot lower. So they're understanding you need to run, warmer temperatures in your rooms, which quite honestly get the environmental conditions really where they should be to be within BPD range. So LEDs here, and it's a way in which you can be more efficient. If you've got proper listings on the LEDs, you can get rebates. All of the Gavita lights do, and on the LED side. And really, that's, to me, a huge advancement. Do more with less, more efficient lights. Also, some of the advancements that are coming down the pipe is multi-spectrum, understanding how the spectrum affects plant growth. There's a whole lot of R&D going on right now with a bunch of companies. And I think that's going to be something in the future that we're going to be able to see come into the cannabis industry. You know, what specific spectrum will push, you know, certain growth characteristics. I think we're going to see a lot of advancement in the extraction side of the industry because, you know, that's really where we're looking at the chemical profile. It's really chemotypes instead of phenotypes for extraction.
And just to, I guess, piggyback back off of what Doug said, there are a lot of different municipalities that are offering huge energy rebates. We're based out of Denver, Colorado, and right now we're getting a 50% rebate on lights. So even though these lights are a little bit more expensive, a lot of the time there's some really, really good incentive programs to help you cover the cost of these lights. And if you look at it from an environmental standpoint and looking forward in the future, most of these new LEDs are losing about 10% of their light output over 8 years of use versus the high pressure sodium, the 1,000-watt lights that we currently use. You're supposed to replace those bulbs every year. The reflectors, you know, really should get some attention about every 2 years. So a lot of the time after 3 or 4 years, the LEDs end up being cheaper than the HPSs with all the replacement and maintenance that you take into account with those things.
Yeah, that's important to note, especially for the people that are trying to decide how they want to, you know, light. It might be a little bit more expensive up front for the LED, but what you're saying, Aaron, is that throughout the long run, with energy savings and, you know, labor savings, you don't have to change the bulbs every year. You can actually end up coming out ahead with the LEDs.
Absolutely. And I've also seen you can get a lot more lights with less cooling required because the LEDs are so much more efficient. So you see lower electricity bills, not only from the lights, but from the HVAC required to treat these rooms. And, you know, I've seen some customers that get in a little bit over their heads where they try cramming too much into one little room. And sometimes LEDs are a good solution to come in and mitigate some of that heat, some of these issues that they're seeing.
Yeah, and Doug, to add to what you said, we were at MJ. Let's see, I think we were at MJ Biz, and we saw what you were talking about there. One of those lights, basically that has the full spectrum of the sunlight, but it's coming from a little tiny bulb, and it was amazing to see how that thing lit up an entire room. You know, it took it a while to get going and everything like that, but then once it did, it put the full spectrum, the UVs, everything like that, to the plant, which I thought was really cool because, you know, obviously it was just this tiny little bulb, but I think you're right. You know, as growers are experimenting with that full spectrum and what that does for their crops, that's going to be a big, you know, that's going to be a big deal moving forward in the future of cultivation.
Yeah, you know, no doubt the, you know, cannabis flower grown in the sun's got a real full body to it. And, you know, growers realize that more than likely that's has a lot to do with the fact that the sun is a basically broad spectrum. And so a lot of growers started implementing, you know, supplemental light into their HPS rooms. And, you know, there were some great improvements. You know, a lot of the extraction guys saw big jumps in terpene and flavonoid production. Bag appeal improved dramatically. But at the end of the day, there were some uniformity issues in those rooms. So the light levels were not always uniform. And in addition to that, there were some pretty big CapEx costs to do that. Not to mention if you already had a facility, kind of having to take everything down and fit those lights in. So, you know, that's a huge deal with LED. Make sure it's got the DLC listing, and you know, there's teams out there now that as long as the fixture's DLC listed, there's teams that can help the end users or the growers work through getting those rebates. So really, we look at even from a CapEx standpoint, pretty darn close now to traditional HID. And you know, OpEx wise, you know, we have a large client down in Southern California that, you know, they have, you know, their OpEx cost on a daily basis is, you know, a few thousand, almost $3,000 just in the power for the fixtures that they run. They were able to save almost $1,000 a day in OpEx by switching over to LED. You save in heating HVAC or cooling costs, you know, you do need to, you know, add in some or have more efficient dehumidification, which kind of closes that gap slightly, but there's still a big savings in for your OpEx.
Okay. And by the way, we're getting some requests from the audience to speak about extraction, so we'll get back to that. But I want to talk about automation. Marc, this is your baby right here. Most everybody knows what automation is, you know, from like a top line level. But can we go just a little bit deeper into what kind of functions are generally automated now, and what kind of functions will be automated in facilities of the future? I mean, are we talking robots here? What's going on, Marc?
It depends on the industry as well. So one of our main goals at Argus is consistency through automation, removing human error. And that's one of the biggest things is you don't want to rely on, like Aaron alluded to earlier, hand watering or somebody turning a ball valve on the wall to be able to water your plants. Having that all automated with EC pH sensors, flow sensors, and getting data back from how often you're feeding, how much you're feeding, what the uptake is. And a lot of what Argus does is data collection. So controlling, like for instance, if you're doing an indoor grow, having one brain control the entire operation just for the grow room specifically. So you're looking at controlling HVAC, dehues, lights, irrigation are the main points, CO2. And that's generally what we would control in a indoor facility. And then with greenhouses, you've got pad vents, roof vents, gable vents. Like you have so much more equipment to control in a greenhouse, which also allows you to get those tighter tolerances in the environment as well. If you've got a greenhouse that's designed correctly with the proper spec-sized equipment, you can really get that thing dialed in, especially if you're using high-level controls to be able to not only control the environment correctly, but get the data back to what you did right and what you did wrong.
Okay. And what are some of the advantages of choosing or considering a plant-centric control system for, you know, your next cannabis or horticultural operation?
Right. So Argus has been controlling plant rooms for over 35 years, and we don't have to write programs for VPD or DLI. We have decades of knowledge and decades of research on this to make sure that these programs are optimized for the growers already. We don't have to write these programs from scratch. We've been in the trench learning for decades. And so you're buying brain power more than anything else. Yes, you're buying controllers and software, but you're buying a legacy of a company that's able to show that, hey, we've been successful across these different industries, not just cannabis. But getting back to your robot comment, one of our customers produces 2,000 pounds of lettuce with 24 people an hour. And so it's all robotics, and then it's also having everything dialed in and having everything connected. It's all having multiple controllers, someone doing lights, someone doing irrigation, someone doing HVAC. It's all connected. And if you have systems that try and combat each other on that, it doesn't end well.
Yeah.
Just to kind of add to that too, I mean, Marc talked about the data collection that they have, and that's incredibly invaluable. We've installed quite a few of these Argus systems with our clients, and I had a client that called us up one time, and they kept having problems in a flower room. It was a 5,000 square foot flower room, and the temperatures consistently started getting hotter, and then they got to a point where they couldn't control the temperature at all. I was able to log into the system and look over there. I mean, the system starts collecting data from the day that you turn it on. But I was able to go over the last 6 months of data out of the room, and I could tell in specific zones where the air conditioners had failed and what days that they failed on. And I was able to direct the client on the roof where to go and what units were broken down. And I was able to remotely troubleshoot it and get them up and going. So especially with what's going on nowadays, like Marc said, if you have one system that has full control of the entire facility, you're looking at your environment, your lights, you can communicate with all of the equipment. It gives you a much better, broader view of what's going inside your facility, and it makes it a lot easier to narrow down problems and solve those problems, so you're not losing quality or product due to these errors.
And
Is
we're
this-
really big on sensors. Sensors they're a high cost.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like an EC moisture probe goes for $1,600, but the amount of data you can get from something like that, it's huge. And so you're not necessarily like, for when's best to water your plants. A lot of folks still run timers, which is great. I'm going to water at this time for X and just get enough nutrients out there. Where like an EC moisture probe, if EC is high and moisture is low, we can just irrigate with water and keep the substrate to the right moisture content. If EC is low and moisture is low, then we can mix whatever recipe that specific zone is calling for and be able to feed the plant exactly when it's hungry, not just because. And so being able to control the little details that make a huge difference in the end.
And that's it too. Like you've got a log of all of this. So if it's when you make a change, it generally takes 2 to 3 months to really see the results of that change. So if you take down a crop and all of a sudden you're hitting just like these outrageous THC numbers and you got these great numbers for weight and everything, you can look back and see exactly what you did to achieve that. And it's a lot easier to replicate that.
And then you can write a program for that specific cultivar and say, whenever we refill the room with X cultivar, we run this program for environmental, lighting, feeding, you name it, and be able to actually just pre-program that room. So every time you flip it, and that's the great thing with the customizability of Argus as well, is if you put a different cultivar, like, oh man, that veg room's down, we got to flip this room over to a veg room. It's just a programming change. It's not an equipment change.
Yeah. This facility I'm sitting in right now is called the Proving Grounds, and we use Argus systems too as well. And to reiterate what their points are of being able to have data capture that not only tells you what the equipment doing, but also on top of that, what the sensors are reading, and to be able to overlay that is really where the rubber meets the road, because you can see what equipment is affecting what environmental controls in your greenhouse, and whether that's in the soil, in the air. You know, there's a myriad of different readings we're taking, and we can always tell what's happening based on what equipment's on, off, how much light we're getting, and to be able to really overlay those into a graph or look at those is really how you dial in environment systems.
Okay. So the automation you guys are saying is incredibly important if we're talking about the future of cultivation, and not just for the processes, but the data.
Yeah, data's everything.
Yeah, I'd say it's a necessity. It's not just important. Like you really can't move forward with these old techniques. Like we're not growing in basements anymore. We're trying to build high quality commercial grade facilities, and we're producing medical products in most of these states. We have to be consistent. We have to keep them clean. We have to be able to measure and monitor this stuff. The cleaner you can keep it, the less you have to attack it and try to treat things.
We're also not selling pounds for $9,000 anymore. So you got to get it dialed in. That's the key to it.
Okay. All right. So the next bucket of the conversation here, this is the good stuff. Let's talk about the actual technique of growing cannabis. And you guys had just talked about data. Growing cannabis often relies on the data that comes from these systems because that data is going to drive recommendations that could transform your facility and, of course, your yields, which is what everybody cares about. So let's start with growing techniques and strategies. Doug, you're a member of the Professional Technical Services team with Hawthorne. Can you briefly tell us what Professional Technical Services is, and can you speak to how fast growing techniques are evolving in modern cannabis, especially since you have been doing this for, 25 plus years?
Yeah, I'm one of the old guys in the cannabis industry now.
You're an OG.
Definitely feel more and more like that every day. But, back in the early days, we did not talk to anybody about how to cultivate cannabis. There was no going online. The grow books were mostly anecdotal information. So, you're basically left to figuring it out on your own. About 10 to 15 years ago, that's when the first, I would say, real commercial cannabis industry began to take shape, which was awesome because we finally had the ability to invest into a professional facility. And, all of a sudden we had all these great tools. So it really helped us begin to master kind of our own styles, which was great. We looking back, we achieved some fairly good results, but still we had a lot of issues, and many times it was real difficult to kind of figure out what was really causing those issues. Those making big improvements today are those that collaborate with their fellow growers, the competition. It's very common in agriculture. You call up your colleagues, and also those that test and capture data. I know we've talked about it a bunch today. So key. You basically, you just don't want to be afraid to ask for outside opinions. Luckily, year by year, the depth of resources available to the cannabis grower continue to improve as we learn more and more about the plant. I mean, just in agriculture in general, we really only learned the tip of the iceberg with many crops. Cannabis is no different, and we're learning. There's so many resources, so much attention right now. We're learning a ton about this plant. Professional technical services, it's a team for us that consists of horticulturists, biologists, soil scientists, engineers, and growers. We're all about data-driven decisions. Technical services provides growers with extensive services and consulting capabilities, ranging from controlled environment services like lighting layouts, bench design, irrigation design, to horticultural services like water quality, growing medium selection, fertilizer delivery, and our irrigation systems, and also, real importantly, irrigation programming, and analytical services like plant tissue analysis, disease diagnostics, etc. There's some areas where regulatory restrictions kind of in a bit prevent some of the growers from being able to do testing, like here in the US, specifically like plant tissue testing. But places like California are allowing that, and I think we're really evolving towards lifting those restrictions so we can really, the grower is going to be able to utilize all of these agricultural tools. Essentially, technical services can show the grower how to do all of this. It's a whole lot of stuff to figure out. Growers have a lot on their plate, and that's what tech service is all about. What all do you need to look at? When do you need to look at? And what sort of actions do you need to implement to incorporate improvements? That is technical services.
Okay. So you've established that we're learning a lot right now. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. And we've also established that that data is super valuable. I mean, it's like they say, data is the new oil. Are those the main metrics that people should be looking for in data collection?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the data for us, we like to have it fall into basically two basic categories: controlled environmental solutions and horticultural solutions. So within the controlled environmental services category, we capture and analyze data related to environmental conditions to help make recommendations associated with HVAC placement, air movement. There's a whole lot of advancements coming, by the way, with air movement. Some pretty cool tech. Still in the proving ground, so to speak. But air movement, dehumidification, odor mitigation. We also capture and analyze lighting data to ensure proper light quality, so spectrum, uniformity throughout the grow space. You can play with those things to drive your plant in certain directions. And then within that horticultural services category, we either capture or we show the cultivator how to capture, and then we analyze the data associated with irrigation water, fertilizer solution, growing media, plant tissue, and also even the finished goods. And then at the end of the day, disease diagnostics, very difficult to we don't even know all the different diseases still to this day that affect cannabis. So having some disease diagnostic expertise is, key.
And just to kind of piggyback off that a little bit, having as many separate data points as you possibly can definitely helps. It is really, really difficult to find a competent, just good grower. There's a lot of people that say that they know what they're doing, but it's rare to find somebody who can truly grow a really, really good cannabis flower. I've been fortunate enough to work with a couple of people who they walk into a room and they're like, it's too hot in here. It's too humid in here. They pick up a block and they say, hey, there's 30% water in here. It's crazy how dialed in and in tune they are. And those people are really rare. And if you can't find somebody like that, you can replace them almost at this point with sensors. We can put stuff in, we can put moisture sensors in our blocks. We can check the environment. And that makes it a lot easier when you call professionals or if you call these horticultural experts to tell them what's going on. It gives them a much better picture and it really helps you identify the problem a lot faster.
And these sensors collecting all of this data, it's important that you can analyze what was done correctly, but let's be honest, this is a science here. You also need to analyze what was done incorrectly, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I say it all the time, and it's I'm not trying to be harsh or be mean or anything, but I really don't care what your feelings are. I don't care if you feel it's this or feel it's that. I need to quantify it. I need to know that it actually was too hot for too long, or it is getting cold at night, or the block, the plant actually is getting too much water and it's drowning. It's really hard because everybody has a separate opinion, and feelings don't matter as much when I have numbers to back everything up. I can tell you exactly what happened to this plant, depending on how you set up the system, every 10 seconds or every 30 seconds. It makes it a lot easier to identify the problems. It really does.
Yeah,
Okay.
It certainly does. The sensors and all of that and all the data plays a huge role. And I think Aaron makes a great point. You still have to have someone competent to be able to read that. And in my opinion, I've seen data that looks perfect and you still have problems. So being able to discern that and move, Aaron made the comment earlier, it takes 2 to 3 months to see something actually change after you make a change in your settings. And so we oftentimes see people look at data and change 6 things at once, and that's just not the way to do it. Really have to take in incremental steps, and those things take time and patience and the right people to do so. So having the data is crucial, and then reacting to the data, how you react to data is more crucial in my opinion too as well.
Yeah, Josh, that was a really good segue to my next question, which is once you've got all that data, you've got to be able to take action based upon it. What are you guys seeing as far as artificial intelligence to help kind of make suggestions based on that data, right here now and moving forward in the industry? And this is for anybody.
Yeah, we had an interesting test done at our test facility for NextGen at the Proving Grounds. It's a facility we teamed up with Mills Nutrients that we basically have an open source of information out to our customers, and we had the opportunity to beta test a camera system called the Luna system, which was taking high resolution photos of the entire facility above the canopy and using AI to basically do facial recognition on the plants to try to detect disease early, to try to guess yield, to try to do a lot of different really cool aspects of that. And the technology I feel is around the corner, and it's really, really exciting. It's not quite there yet because I simply don't think there's enough cataloging and algorithms amongst the images to be able to tell. But after running the system for some time, we really got some really interesting maps off of our yield reports, for example, where the greenhouse had gutter shadows. We saw consistently less yield in this 2-foot area that we were having shadows, and really different neat aspects of it that I think in the future of AI is going to be important, because at some point you'll probably have a camera that goes over your greenhouse and is able to spot things before humans can.
A lot of the issues that we're still kind of having as far as AI goes is we're still federally illegal. So a lot of companies, these universities that have access to these AI programs that would really be able to, utilize that technology aren't legally allowed to. So to kind of go back to the data collection, if you have all of that and you have a good log of it, when you do get access to a resource like that, you have years of data that you can turn over to the computer, and it gives you an excellent look forward. I mean, if you've got all that, at that point, it'll be able to plot out your course for the next 10 years. It's a lot easier to move forward.
I know our R&D department's working really hard on, we have all this data, but the platform to quantify it, to be able to make to autonomously make environmental decisions just doesn't really exist yet. And so I know our R&D department's working a lot on okay, we have all this data, where can we input it to make changes, or what platform can we integrate with to make these changes? And to Aaron's point, yeah, it's coming. It's just that we're not there yet, but it's definitely coming.
Yeah, it's like they say, knowledge is power, but it's really not. It's application of that knowledge, so that becomes the key point right here. And what about, since we're talking about the future of commercial cannabis cultivation, you guys seen anything with drones? Are they playing a role at all with anything here?
I've seen them in outdoor fields. A lot of people are definitely starting to use them. People are using them for surveying. A lot of the more commercial grade drones, you set them up and you tell it what area you want it to look at, and the drone will fly a grid, and it'll map out the whole property that you're working with, and they print out these super high resolution pictures so you can identify certain areas of your crop that are having issues. There's definitely not enough space in an indoor or a greenhouse facility really to run a drone. I'd be scared to hit something and
even those little tiny ones, those little.
Yeah, they still. I've flown a drone into a plant, and it turns into a weed whacker pretty quick.
All right. So we've got probably about 8 minutes before we're going to jump to the Q&A. And by the way, keep the questions coming. You guys have been putting some awesome ones forward, and I'm really excited to talk to the panel about it. But everybody that's tuned in here, they want actionable stuff. They want to leave this webinar with stuff that they can do right now and things that are going to be important to help them, with their cultivation. And especially with cannabis being the, such a huge crop moving into the future. I mean, basically America's next big commodity crop. So first question is for Aaron. I know we've talked about how choosing the right vendor to partner with is an essential part of this conversation. Can you just touch on why these relationships are so important?
Everybody kind of does everything a little bit differently. It's really, really good we've been in the industry for a long time. I've been able to vet a lot of our partners. We've worked with a bunch of people that just necessarily haven't worked out. Every piece of equipment or every manufacturer has little nuances. There's some lights, for instance, that will fail to 100% on when they lose communication. There's other lights that will turn off. It depends on what sector they came from and how they develop their products. So we're pretty picky about the vendors that we work with. They're people with a lot of experience, and they really know what they're doing, because we definitely don't have all the answers. But I can answer anything because of the people that I'm associated with. If I have an issue or a problem, I can call any of these guys on the screen or a host of other people, and they're more than willing to share information and knowledge with me because I've been working with them for so long. So it's really, really important to choose partners that are interested in your success so they can succeed too, and they steer you in the correct direction.
Okay. And I'm just going to open it up to the panel. Can you give the audience some actionable advice right now? Some things you can sprinkle them with a little bit of wisdom right now. I think they are definitely all ears.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I like to recommend to pretty much every grower is reach out to the manufacturers if they have a tech services team and link up with them. Technical services is not sales, it's tech support for the grower. And the better teams focus on what is best for the grower, regardless if they have a product to sell in that category. Good manufacturers have good products that the data and their performance make them the obvious choice. So, we're here to help show the growers how to set up and implement a professional, data-driven cultivation strategy. We're here to make it a whole lot easier to make this happen.
Okay.
that I really see a lot of people doing, and it's unfortunately a result of how people are awarded licenses. I've seen some states where they require you to have an operating facility in 6 months. Sometimes they give you 12 to 18 months. But it's always a rush. And the state definitely, generally the states impress upon people that it's a rush. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can offer people is to kind of take a breath, step back, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. You don't want to build something that's not going to work that you later have to rip apart and spend more money trying to fix. Some of these systems definitely do have a little bit more, a higher CapEx to get into. Build out half of your facility. Build, it's why half-ass two things when you can whole-ass one thing? It's like, do the best you can with what you have. Don't spread it out, because then you just have a whole facility that everybody has to fight. I'd rather have half a facility that is just a rocket ship,
And one of the biggest environmental factors that I see too is air movement. As important as temperature and humidity and CO2 levels and everything is, if your air movement isn't correct, if you have microclimates in your room, whether you're doing 100,000 square foot greenhouse or a 200 or 2,500 square foot room, if your air movement is incorrect, you're gonna be fighting an uphill battle the whole time. Oscillating fans are not air movement. You would never, if you go to a tomato facility or a lettuce facility, you would never see that. And so getting a company that understands air movement and can read your plans and say, oh, there's a pillar here, so this is going to deflect air. We need to mitigate this, and making sure that you've got the right partners for that. Because once you've got your air movement dialed in, everything else it's a little bit of a smoother ride. You're not fighting an uphill battle as consistently.
Yeah, I'll agree with Mark there. We're developing systems currently that are really our number one focus is air movement. You're dealing with a crop in a greenhouse that is traditionally unseen. Before, we're dealing with tomatoes that are long and stringy that have a lot of air movement, the availability for a lot of air movement before. Bedding plants that were very short that you could get air movement very easily over the top. Now you've put a 4 foot by 4 foot dense hedge in a humid environment that really is susceptible to humidity diseases. So that air movement becomes a crucial factor in that. As far as the business practices side, I think being realistic from a starting point, from an operational, both from a facility design and expectations on performance, you're going to start growing cannabis as a novice, and you're going to fail. That's just inevitable. You're going to have crop failures after crop failure when you start. So build that into your business model. That has to be in there. Even really good growers I've seen transition into greenhouses struggle, or if you're just starting out and you think your first month is going to be in the green, do not put that on your performa. That's not realistic. I mean, I can tell you from hundreds and hundreds of clients that just doesn't happen. So air movement and have a little cushion.
That's very, very good advice, Josh. And by the way, the audience wants to know, what are you growing behind you?
These are fruitless tomatoes. Finest.
We've actually got the point now where we get to take the audience questions, and they are bringing them in fast and furious. So the first question that I've got is from Rocky Duran, and he wants to know, this is for you, Josh, what is the Proving Grounds, and how have you been using it to help your customer base as well as the industry?
The Proving Grounds is what I'm sitting in currently. It is our test facility that's located in northern San Diego County. It's a licensed 40,000 square foot facility that I really built along with my partner Chris from Mills Nutrients to put myself in the grower's shoes. So when we're building a greenhouse for you, we're not just the Hair Club president, we're actually a member. And it's an open source, so we really try to share our successes and failures with all of our clients, and then use that to benefit them.
Okay. Peter Doherty asks, from a facilities and environmental systems design perspective, what tools, and this is for everybody here, do you utilize to model latent load requirements and systems ability to deliver during the design and build phase?
One of the biggest things that I generally use, there's a lot of easy ones. I guess we kind of say, I generally recommend like a ton of cooling for 2000 watts of high pressure sodium light. And you can generally slip, depending on the LED manufacturer, you can get 3 or 4 of the LED equivalents under that same load. It gets really difficult depending on what kind of environment you're in. I know in Colorado, most engineers spec like a 98% sensible and a 2% latent. Our rooms are generally more like a 60-40. Their environment is much, much closer to an indoor pool area. So my biggest recommendation, especially with one of these bigger facilities, is to find a qualified, competent engineering firm to work with, a good mechanical engineer, and to really work with them to make sure that the equipment that is being selected for the room will fit. There's a lot of engineering firms that have the software and the ability to completely model these rooms, and they can tell you what the airflow is going to be, exactly how much moisture is going to be in there. And as far as like from the grower's perspective, you have to do a really good job of knowing what your numbers are. You have to tell them exactly how many plants you're going to put in the room and how much you intend to feed them. And those numbers are really, really important, because I've had people come to me and they're telling me that they're going to be indoors and they're going to be feeding their plants like 2 or 3 gallons a day of water. And that's insane. Like, I don't know anybody that does that. And if I try to build a system to accommodate that, you're going to spend 2 or 3 times more than you should have. So it's really, really knowing your numbers and working with competent people.
Learning how to read a psychometric chart.
That too.
Incredibly important. It is complicated, but understanding that chart is incredibly important as well.
And it even becomes more complex in a greenhouse, because then you factor in solar gain, which is a whole nother animal.
Yeah.
So NGMA standards have helped a little bit, but there isn't a solid book to go into for greenhouse heat and latent loads.
All right. What's the monetary and the energy differential between indoor and outdoor greenhouses? This is from Rocky Duran.
Aaron, you want to take a stab?
I mean, once again, it really just depends on where you're going to be at. We have built some really, really cool greenhouses. We did a hybrid style greenhouse up in the mountains in Colorado. It had all block walls, but it had a polycarbonate roof. And I mean, that thing was really, really energy efficient. But I mean, at times we had, 5 foot of snow on the roof of this thing. So we had to make sure that it was really built correctly for that. By far, in my opinion, the cheapest solution anybody's ever going to find is to grow in a greenhouse in the proper climate. Southern Colorado, Northern California, I mean, not so much northern, but California, there's a lot of areas that greenhouses just thrive. They're in, can't remember exactly what zone it is, but they're in a good area. Other than that, like, there's a lot of facilities where indoor would be much, much better. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on in Chicago right now. I would hate to build a greenhouse up there. I would recommend everybody do indoor. So it really just depends on where you're building.
Yeah, that's I'll reiterate that. There's not another crop that can't cross state lines. So you don't see, in the agricultural world, you certainly don't see tomatoes being grown in a greenhouse in Florida, because there's too much disease pressure. Mm-hmm. So the fact that that cannabis is localized in that area, you can certainly build a greenhouse wherever you want. As it gets into the perfect climate for a greenhouse is the perfect outdoor weather for the plant, regardless. That's the least amount of energy you're ever going to use if you build your greenhouse right where the perfect outdoor grow is. So, Aaron, to reiterate Aaron's point, that's right. If you want a really cheap running facility that you're not using much energy, build it where it's always 75 degrees and 50% humidity.
Okay, I got a question from Ian Davidson. He wants to know, how will young plant production evolve in the future? Cloning versus tissue culture versus seed?
So we've seen a lot more increase in tissue culture, at least we have. Argus' sister company, Conviron, they manufacture research grade grow chambers, whether it's a walk-in or a reach-in. and be able to give you the optimum environment for tissue culture seed production. And whether you're doing that indoor or in a greenhouse, you can set up tissue culture labs or chambers inside your head house in your greenhouse, and your veg should be set up inside an indoor facility inside a greenhouse that feeds the flowering rooms. And so companies like Environ, and they're really like these engineered solutions, they can run incredibly tight parameters and make sure to give you a repeatable process every time. Yes, this is farming, and there's always a wrench that can be thrown into the cog of the wheel. But if you have a repeatable process in properly designed and engineered equipment, that's where I see the future of this going. Is a lot more tissue culture, a lot more lab-like facilities inside of the grow facility.
Yeah, and I would add to that, growers in the past, for the most part, have been pretty hesitant to bring in clones from somewhere else, right? Whatever pest, disease, virus that plant has, all of a sudden is in your facility. Obviously, tissue culture has the ability to provide stock that is basically, you can certify it as being pest and disease free. And with a lot of the genomics enhancements, the ability to genotype things these days, the nurseries are also able to certify these as being true to type. So essentially, if they're telling you it's, a specific cultivar, they can prove that it is through genetic testing. So that's a big deal. In the past, the kind of the challenge, after there's a ton of professional tissue culturists that have figured out how to successfully tissue culture cannabis. So we're kind of over that hump now. But the biggest challenge I think that we face next is just the cost. The cost per start is significantly higher than with vegetative propagation, is traditional cloning. But I can say that I've seen with my own eyes some technology that automates one of the very labor-intensive parts of tissue culture. And essentially that advancement cuts the costs, the COGS of the start by 2/3, making it essentially right in line cost per start with traditional manual vegetative propagation. So you'll have certified pest and disease free, true to type, vigorous, basically clones at a very affordable price. That's definitely the future. I don't know a single grower out there that given all of those improvements and the fact that they don't have to deal with propagation and mother plants, which is a huge challenge for pretty much any grower. I don't know any grower that wouldn't do that, And also with genomics, we'll get into a place probably pretty soon. In Canada, they already have, they already have plant protection. It's I forget the name of it, but basically they have our version of patents, and so essentially you're protected. And we'll get that down here too. So you'll be able to sign a contract with a nursery where only you get that particular cultivar, and that'll also give you that competitive advantage.
Okay. All right. We got time for just a few more questions here. Let's see. Philip Douglas wants to know, do you guys see rainwater harvesting as a beneficial water supply?
As long as you can clean it.
Yeah, and you can legally use it. I know in Colorado we're not allowed to. They just changed those rules. I think you're allowed to use them for personal use, but I still don't think you're allowed to for commercial use because a lot of states claim that water. It's theirs if it falls over their state. So
okay.
You can clean it and legally use it. You can definitely incorporate it into your system.
We've built a lot of facilities that have a greenhouse is a great roof to capture rainwater on, and actually this facility has the ability to capture it. But to Aaron's point, it has to be captured legally within the state and just cleaned back up.
Okay. Got another question here. Do you believe monocropping whole facilities is the future?
That's a little bit hard. I know a lot of people do monocropping so that they can reuse their nutrients. And if you know what's going on, like if you're doing it with lettuce, it's really, really easy to say that the plant's going to eat X amount of nitrogen or X amount of potassium or whatever. It's really, really hard to do with cannabis, especially with all the different cultivars. A lot of them eat differently. I really, really want the ability to be able to do that. I would love to be able to capture all of my runoff and have enough sensors in the tank that would tell me exactly what the values of the solution inside that tank are. And then I'd love to just amend it and send it back to the plants. It's something that I would absolutely love to do, and I'm always looking at it, but I have not found a solution yet that I'm comfortable with pushing back onto my plants. There's just so much money at stake if I can't clean it up correctly, or if I get something weird growing there and I damage my plants. That's just not an acceptable risk to me at this point.
Okay. We've had a couple people ask, what sensors are you using to monitor and make decisions? It's for anybody.
Yeah, that's a pretty broad question. There's a lot. There's a lot going on for that question. I would say that one of the key things with sensors is to make sure that you're buying sensors that can integrate with your controls company.
Okay.
I know Aaron and I had this issue with a specific company where the customer had bought all these sensors, spent tons of money, and the sensors had proprietary software that wouldn't allow Argus controls to extract any data from them. So they basically they spent all this CapEx buying these sensors that don't work with their controller. And what's the point of buying sensors that don't work with a controller? So like the Meter Group and Omega make a lot of really great sensors. The Grodan Grow Sense, we can integrate with that. So it just depends on what sensor's being used.
Common in the greenhouse are temp, humidity, CO2, in that order. Then you can start to look at, obviously ECPH of all the nutrients. That's a whole different realm of sensors. Indoor and outdoor sensors, PAR light sensors for both indoor and outdoor, so you can make proper reactions. In a greenhouse environment, you want to know what's happening outside as well as inside, so you can make control reactions.
You can get weather stations for the greenhouses that have outdoor, like most of them come with outdoor temperature. And then you can get an add-on for outdoor humidity as well. So you know exactly what type of air you're pulling into your greenhouse. Putting flow meters on solenoids, just because your control system told the solenoid to open, that's mechanical. There's no way of verifying if that solenoid opened or not. So having a flow meter that if we tell solenoid 1 and zone 1 to open and there's no flow, then we can let the facilities person know, hey, this solenoid in this zone is acting up. You need to go check it out.
Gotcha.
Too, but like wind direction, you want to know what direction the wind's blowing and how fast it's going. You don't want to open a vent directly into the wind; it'll rip it right off the outside of your right off the outside of your structure. And to Mark's point too, if you pick a good controller, and as long as you know what communication protocols they have, I can basically wire almost any sensor into Argus if it's 0 to 10 volt or 4 to 20 milliamp. They're really, really good, and they're really willing to work with us. There's a couple of others who are really, really good and willing to work with you, and they'll try to pull anything into their system.
Okay. Well, speaking of wind direction, the direction of this webinar is we are just about out of time, but I want to give a big shout out to the panel. You guys have been absolutely incredible. Aaron, Doug, Marc, Josh, really appreciate your guys' time. Anybody that's attending this, I would recommend, if you've got questions, get their names and maybe reach out to them on LinkedIn, through their websites or something like that. And I'd also like to give a big shout out to Ricardo Baca and his team and Grasslands for putting this together. This has absolutely been great. I've got a few more questions. I feel like we could go forever, but we've got to, I'll get back to work and everything like that. So again, thank you everybody for joining us. If you want more information about this stuff, make sure that you're looking to, some of the magazines and publications that are out there that are really good on, cultivation and things like that. Check out the websites, listen to the podcast. There's a lot of great information out there. And it was a real pleasure just being able to speak with you guys today.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks,
Chuck.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.